It's been months since you haven't made any art because you just couldn't find the inspiration. But one day you wake up with a clear vision in your head of what you want to create. But when it comes the time to actually make the art, you end up with something straight up lame compared to what you saw in your head. How did this happen when it was so clear in my head? I'll tell you how. There are three main reasons to why doing what you see in your head is actually really hard. Let's talk about the first one. When you create art, you're being creative. Being creative means that you are making something new. Now, do you remember the last time you tried to learn a new skill? It was pretty hard. Learning new things is hard. So being creative is hard because you are creating new stuff. And being creative is actually harder than just learning a new skill because it is as if you were creating the skill on the spot. And on top of that, art is usually presented as if you were an expert at it already. When you are learning, let's say, a new language, every time you make an improvement, you can show it off to your friends. But with art, people mostly care about the final product. Let's say that you just wrote a beautiful song yesterday. You cannot release it just now. You have to first learn how to play it and make sure that when you record it finally, you sound like an expert at your own song. So yeah, it sounds really bad. But now think about this. When you are creating your art and it suddenly gets really hard, it may be an indicative that you're actually creating something new, which was your goal all along. Artists seek to make new things all the time. So when you feel that your craft is getting really hard, it might mean that you are on the right track. It's hopeful. Anyway, let's talk about the second reason. Do you remember those times at school where you studied really hard to make a presentation for your classroom, but when it came the time to actually make the presentation, you just couldn't find a way to explain yourself? It was really clear in your head, but it was hard to explain. Well, sadly, very sadly, is the same for art. When you see a beautiful picture in your head of a drawing you want to make, your brain is lying to you. Your brain is only showing you the really nice parts of your drawing and is filling the gaps with random stuff. That is just how the brain works. You may think that this only happens to drawings and paintings, but it's the same for all arts. If you're a musician, you for sure have experienced this thing where when you are playing a song for yourself, it's pretty awesome. But when you play it in public, it's just terrible. You may think that it is terrible because the people makes you nervous. But that's not true. This also happens when you try to record yourself on your own. When you are recording yourself, you suddenly become aware of all the mistakes you are making. On the previous reason, I give you some hope, telling you that it is hard because you may be on the right track. On this one is just sad. And it gets worse. Let's talk about the last reason. Let's say that you can see a nice picture in your head and your brain is actually not lying to you. You can actually see the whole picture. Well, even then, you would fail. And I can prove it to you. Try to draw a perfect circle. You can't. Well, it's really hard. You know how a perfect circle looks like, but when you try to draw it, it takes a bunch of effort, a bunch of tries. You have to fix a bunch of mistakes. And it's just a circle. That happens because when you visualize something in your head, it exists in the imagination realm. And in order to manifest your imagination into the real world, you depend on real world things. In the case of a hand drawn circle, you depend on your hand, and your hand is just a limb. Now, since we are talking about the real world, you may think that this only applies to physical, tangible type of arts like paintings, sculpture, but it's the same again for all arts. Let's say that you are trying to write a story. A story is not tangible. You would think it's all intellectual, but actually you depend on vocabulary, and vocabulary has limitations. When you want to make a movie, it doesn't matter how good of a writer you are, your limitation is probably your budget. So you get the idea. The imagination realm is limitless. The real world has limitations. So that is why it is really hard to do exactly what you see in your head. If you want tips on how you can actually deal with all these problems, you can watch my video, How to Deal with Writer's Block. There I give you real answers and methods. But in all honesty, if you're a true artist, you already know what to do. You have to practice. So do that. If you like these videos where we talk about art, subscribe. If you know more reasons to why it is so hard to manifest the imagination realm onto the real world, leave a comment. And if you want to support this channel and me as an artist, visit my website diegoelc.com. My name is Diego Lizondo, and I appreciate your attention.